So our timetable says it's a question and answer session. If anybody has any questions. Yes, make 3.
Actually, it might be a little silly, but you said in the morning about the Devas who attained the enlightenment right after the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. I always assumed that the Devas were these ethereal, they didn't have a physical body, and the only difference between the reason we take a human birth and the luxury of a human birth is that we have that ability to attain, not taking birth in any other loka. So I didn't assume how a Deva can attain the ultimate liberation. What's the difference between the two lokas?
Yeah, so I'm not a Deva at the moment, so I can't speak from my own experience, but you can probably help me. There's a subtle form realm, isn't there? And then there's the formless realms. So the Devas have bodies, the Bhuma Devas and the Chatu Maharaja Devas. It's a more subtle form. And then you have I'm sure Mr. Dan knows, how do they define these realms in samsara again? You have the form, sensual realms, which includes the human, is it? Yeah. And then you've got Brahmalokas. Even the lower Brahmas, Devas still have form. It gets progressively more subtle. So the insight that Nekondanya had, all that is of the nature to arise is of the nature to cease. So I would assume that if a Deva had a requisite level of mindfulness, they would be able to see, from what they're experiencing, impermanence in their thoughts and feelings, for example. So it's not just like, for example, in the Visuddhimagga, it's explained that a person can attain liberation through metta jhana. So that's an interesting thing to consider, because a person who has metta jhana is experiencing a Brahma-like mind state. And the way a person attains through cultivating metta jhana is noticing the jhanic state degenerate, from coming out of the jhanic state and then noticing from appana samadhi to upajjhara samadhi. There's a change in the level of refinement of the mind. So if a human being practicing jhana can attain, by cultivating subtle changes in those jhanic mind states, I would assume that a Deva should be able to do the same thing. And I think that there are examples. Didn't Indra attain to stream entry listening to the Buddha? So we have examples in the sutta where Indra himself, king of the gods, had a list of doubts, was finally able to come and see the Buddha and talk about some of his doubts. The Buddha addressed him and he attained stream entry. And I believe there's another one where Sariputta is talking about the fetters that remain after the difference between a Sotapanna and which fetters remain after Sotapanna, Sakadagami, Anagami. Apparently a huge number of Devas, I think this was the Buddha said, a huge number of Devas were listening to Sariputta's discourse. Apparently Sariputta wasn't aware that the Devas were listening, but he was giving a discourse, and a huge number of Devas who were listening attained while listening to him. So I can't remember which Sutta Pitaka, but I've definitely read that in the Sutta Pitaka. So there's lots of examples there are examples of Devas attaining in the suttas. And it's often said that human birth is the best birth. And but I've never seen that as quoted by the Buddha. I've I've never seen that myself. Have you, Mr. Da? The Buddha said the human birth is the best birth for cultivation. He certainly says the bhikkhu training is the most fertile field for cultivation. He does say that. But,
in fact, he does say that all anagamis will not come in this world and be liberated in the
Devaloka.
Sutavati, yes.
Yeah. So that itself is a...
It's the final realization.
Yeah.
So yeah. If a person has the 5 spiritual powers developed enough, then when they have even a more subtle experience, they can grow from that and they can develop insight. I'm sure there's other examples. That's just 2 examples that come to mind. But it was Ajahn who said that and I don't know what his source is, but he, having been to India many times himself, he probably got some information somewhere. This is commentarial, isn't it? But there's the commentarial understanding that the relics will all come together at the end of 5,000 years. And is that? Have you ever read that, Mr. Da? Do you know that text, commentarial text? At the end of the 5,000 years, all of the relics in the world come together, and apparently, before they disappear, a great number of devas. Okay, I think this is a Sri Lankan and Thai belief. Do you know that one? Have you heard that one? They say at Ruanwali Sayatedi, actually, is where the relics all come together. This is the Buddha's passing in final nibbana. They said there wasn't a space the size of a pinprick for, was it 20 yojanas, that didn't have a deva. They'd come to see the passing of the Buddha. So they're certainly very aware of the Buddha.
So just out of curiosity, if there is physical form, then all the suffering that goes with the human form, like heat, cold, defecation, urination, all these kind of physical sufferings.
Right.
Do these devas also, noting that you're not a deva, just out of curiosity?
I'll tell you something interesting. Before I answer that question, before I attempt to answer that question, when I asked Ajahn, can devas attain enlightenment, he looked at me and he said, only devas attain enlightenment. I said, what do you mean, Venerable Sir? He said, so normally the insight's going to be occurring in a kind of an upajjhara samadhi state. Listening very intently, the mind is or contemplating after coming out of a jhanic state or almost absorbing into a jhanic state, but there needs to be some reflection occurring, some penetration of insight. So it'll be happening either just before the jhana or just after the jhana. And I think Tushita heaven correlates with upajjhara samadhi in terms of a experience of devas. And then you've got the Brahma loka. Apparently, when they're dying, the devas feel pain. It's kind of a bit depressing that apparently most of the devas go to hell at the end of their deva life. So it says that in the suttas as well. So because you have a lifetime of experiencing mostly pleasure, and what happens is the mindfulness gets a bit weak. This is one of the values of the human birth, is actually having to practice with pain and suffering, is you can make your mindfulness stronger. It's like qualities of patiently enduring and fortitude, patience, enduring patiently. You have to depend on mindfulness. Whereas the devas can have, as a result of their merits, having given others happiness and pleasure, they experience happiness and pleasure. But when the merit starts to run out, the body gets racked with pain. The flowers wilt. There's bad smells. And all those other devas that are all kind of addicted to pleasure and never see anything ugly or smell anything bad or see anything horrible, they all run away. And the deva kind of dies alone, dejected, smelling bad, in pain. So I shouldn't laugh. But so there are dangers obviously to being reborn as a deva. But that's what it was saying, is like if one has established the habit of Dhamma reflection and of practice very firmly as a human being, and then aspires to continue practice. So you don't do this practice and accumulate merit just for the sake of experiencing heavenly pleasure, but you intend to practice in every life. So then I would assume among the devas there are those that still come and listen to Dhamma talks. And Ajahn says, in terms of deva realms, to aspire to be reborn in Tushita heaven is the most suitable for the Buddhist cultivator. It's an interesting thing to consider because Tushita means contented. So the heaven of the contented. And how often do we feel contentment? It's not that often, is it? And they have a whole realm of contented beings. And of course the Buddhas spend their final life as a bodhisattva in Tushita heaven before coming down. So I would assume that Maitreya Bodhisattva is already in Tushita heaven. And apparently that's a realm that you can go to where you can still meditate and accumulate merits. And apparently going higher is dangerous because if you go to a Brahma realm, the radiance is a little intoxicating, and the Brahma Devas can start to think that they're wonderful because of the radiance, identify with the radiance and develop more vanity and conceit. So apparently Buddhists, there's a lot of different Buddhist paths. There's people who are on the path to be an arahant with analytical knowledges, for example, or to be a great disciple of a Buddha, or to be a Pacceka Buddha. And those longer paths take many thousands of more lives. And apparently they will rest occasionally in the Tushita realm before coming down and building more virtue in the human realm. So Tushita is apparently full of Buddhist cultivators. And if I have to be reborn, I'm interested in Tushita myself. So. But I don't think it's easy to be born in Tushita. One requires a very, very powerful faith. And the mind has to have been accustomed with Upajjhara Samadhi quite often, quite frequently. Have to be established in frequently experiencing Upajjhara.
Venerable Ajahn, can you please explain more about equanimity and how to cultivate it, how to know it's there or it's not there?
Yeah, okay.
How to identify?
Yeah, so I think one of the best ways to cultivate equanimity in my own experience is meditation. Because when you're talking about a quality of equipoise or balance, serenity, tranquility, when you come to meditate, that's not usually where we start. We start with there are some of the hindrances, or there is some reactivity to worldly dhammas. When you come to your meditation pillow, and I often do that. I often just look at, is there any suffering present? Because I like to start with metta, and normally there is. So it's like, okay, it's a good place to start. And if you're interested in the first noble truth, unsatisfactoriness, and then you want to get into cultivating the path leading beyond that, well, just acknowledge that first, the experience of suffering. But then what do you do when you're experiencing one of the 5 hindrances? When you keep applying the mindfulness to the meditation object until the hindrance is pacified or falls away. So just in the very act of meditation, suppose it's sensual craving. So, okay, well, now's not the time for that. You're going to be meditating for this hour, so you can't have the ice cream, or you can't have the brownie, or you can't have the cappuccino, whatever it is. The Ferrari, it's like, no, we're meditating now. And what happens is when you won't act on a desire quickly, the desire itself kind of gets frustrated, it just falls away. If you're not going to act on it, and if you are going to sit, it will just fall away from the mind. And then irritation and aversion, sometimes you have to cultivate metta, you have to cultivate the antidote. So if it's a more volatile type of craving, you have a passionate, lustful obsession, well then you have to contemplate, maybe I'll die today. Lord Booker recommends death meditation as a daily practice. And if I knew for sure I was going to die this afternoon, would I still be lusting after this? You use these wisdom reflections. And it's like, if you really consider it, and sometimes it's stubborn, you might have to think, well, how might I die today? You have to ask yourself, is it possible? Yeah, I suppose it's possible. And it's like, well, how? When you think of the ways. Okay, crossing the road, someone's car crashing into you, or the various ways you could die. And 1.2 million people die in the bathroom a year, apparently. 1.2 million people die in a swimming pool. That's a lot of people. So then, if you really meditate upon that you could die today, when there's a lot of thinking about the future, or a lustful, or any of them, irritation, when you ask yourself, okay, you really might die, you really accept that, most of the time it's not so important anymore. Even if you're angry at somebody, do you want to die? Do you want to be angry the moment you die towards this person? And you can always ask yourself, where do you think you'll be reborn in this moment if you die right now? And then usually what happens is it's humbled. Your reactivity is humbled and you're sobered. And so it's when the hindrance falls away, and there's a lot of insight that you can develop at that as well. You can notice the cessation, nirodha sanya. So that all of these hindrances will have the moment that they fall away from the mind. So also having a little bit of determination to notice that, notice the cessation. And it's that time before the next hindrance, that's equanimity, before whatever comes up next. But if you can just be with the breath, and if there isn't a hindrance for a period of time, you're having it's not pure equanimity. Pure equanimity is the fourth jhana. But it's, you do have moments of kanika samadhi where there is equanimity. It's like ordinary equanimity, a little bit of equanimity becomes the more profound equanimity. And it's the whole praise and blame stuff. So somebody criticized you, seemed to be unfair. You come to your pillow and you've got some hurt feelings, and contemplate that even the Buddha was blamed, the Arahants are blamed, great leaders are blamed. When you contemplate the pervasiveness of that experience for everybody, and you can come to a space of just accepting the fact that good people are unfairly blamed, and it falls away. It's like, but you have to use these wisdom reflections and then really notice that. What's it like when the aversion to the criticism falls away from the mind? What's it like when the intoxication with the praise falls away from the mind? What's it like when the hindrance falls away from the mind? And this is how we, Luang Por Cha, and Ajahn and Nun are often saying, "Mai yin di, mai yin lai, wang chit pen klang." Don't fall into liking, don't fall into not liking, keep the mind in the middle. And actually this is so much of what practice of the middle way is. It's like, and that analogy I was talking about this morning, Luang Por Cha says, sit in the chair of the mind and be aware of the various guests that try to come in. That's the mind states. You don't have to be like at the door, slamming the door. You have to be occupying. And Luang Por Cha uses the analogy of a chicken coop. You just, presence of mind is there. Mind states will arise, thoughts will arise, but you don't let them invade. You don't let them take over. You let them wander in and wander out. And then not falling into liking and disliking and noticing the arising and the ceasing, and then just keeping the mind balanced. And then I think it's in meditation retreats and when you do longer sessions that you get periods of equanimity, or periods of upajjhara samadhi, where there's very few hindrances, or the hindrances are very subtle, and the mind is in a balanced, tranquil, peaceful state. And it's really important to train the mind to notice how pleasant that is. Because our addiction to sensuality is very convincing, compelling. And the peace of tranquility, because it's subtle, we can overlook it. And it's like, no, you have to pay attention. This is better. This is nicer. The mind that isn't agitated is actually, well, the Buddha says, peacefulness is the highest happiness. But you actually have to notice that, because these other things will come in and lie to you. If you have this, you'll be happy. If you have that, you'll be happy. And that's what the kilesa do. They lie. It's a delusion. And we have to train ourselves to notice, no, whenever I follow a kilesa, the result isn't happiness. and when I just keep the mind balanced and the peacefulness deepens, that is a superior type of happiness. But for myself, like noticing the cessation is very helpful of a hindrance or of a painful mind state. I just notice the point when it stops, and then allow keeping the mind in that balanced, still state, not swayed either way, for as long as you can. It deepens, and you develop an appreciation for that equipoise. You often find after a good meditation where some mindfulness has become well established and there's been some collectedness, that when you come out of the meditation, noises affect you less, and there's this kind of well-being. It's okay, everything's okay. And it's very interesting meditating in Bodh Gaya, as we have been for 10 hours a day, and you have to walk past these trucks, motorbikes, rickshaws, dogs, beggars, hawkers, and you can be in a very serene state where it's all whatever, just not affecting the mind very much. It's very nice. You can also be in a bit of a dreamy state. It was one of the reasons I'm sure that Devas are in Bodh Gaya is the fact that I haven't been killed on that road back to the guest house. So kind of, in this truck. I can't speak with experience about third and fourth jhana, but I think isn't the fourth jhana as it's described pure equanimity? But I think there's quite a bit in third jhana as well, isn't there? In terms of understanding the importance of it as a quality, as a Brahmavihara, when it deepens, is apparently the way the stream enter becomes the arahant is through abiding in equanimity. Because it's taking the equanimity, looking on with abiding equanimity, is what starves what remains of greed and hatred. So it will come up, not moving, not acting on it. It kind of shrivel up and fall away. So the equanimity, that fourth jhana, plays a very important role in getting the person from stream entry to arahant. But I also like how Tanajanan describes samadhi, kanika samadhi, upajara samadhi, anapana samadhi. It's all samadhi. And so kanika samadhi becomes upajara samadhi becomes apana samadhi, but it's all samadhi. And then I would say it's similar with equanimity. In kanika samadhi, there's a little bit of equanimity. In upajara samadhi, there's more equanimity. And in the jhanic states, the higher jhanic states, it's pure and profound equanimity. So, in terms of equanimity with worldly dhammas and the painful things that we see around us all the time, the wisdom reflection that helps us be equanimous is the understanding of the law of karma. So, like why horrible things appear to happen to good people, or why horrible things happen to oneself when one hasn't done anything wrong, that you can see. There's this understanding that if you hadn't set the karmic cause in motion, it wouldn't have occurred. It's very humbling. It's a very beautiful. It's a bittersweet reflection, but it's a very beautiful tool when we're in one of those self-righteous. Because self-righteousness is painful when someone's done something that seems to be wrong and you feel slighted. And for myself, I like to count when I've been offended or hurt, because the mind will just think it again and again and again. She shouldn't have said this, blah, blah, he shouldn't have, blah, 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 because blah, 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 blah. And after about 9 or 10, I'll go, 9. Yeah, but he really shouldn't have, because blah, 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 blah. 10. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. 15. And there's at a certain point, it's like, I understand that you feel that way. I heard you. I'm talking to myself. And then it's like, but if you hadn't set the karmic causes for this in motion, then that painful speech wouldn't have come. And so at a certain point, you have to accept that you made the karma which caused this thing to occur. And it's not, one has to be careful. You don't use that reflection to become mean and indifferent. You use that reflection to keep the mind balanced. So it's like, if you can help somebody, help them. If you can't help somebody, because the near enemy of compassion is distress. So it's like, you have a compassion for somebody and you start to feel personally distressed about their suffering. That's not pure compassion anymore. And Lord Buddha isn't saying that we should feel distress. That's falling into kilesa and hindrances. So it's like, no, compassion is you really, really want to help, wholeheartedly. And if you can't, equanimity. You don't need to waste any time feeling distressed. Feel with the suffering, want to do something about it, empathy. Recognize you can't help yet, equanimity. Don't need to waste any time at all. Help the people you can help. Be equanimous with the ones you can't. And Luang Por Liam is a very interesting example of someone with a lot of equanimity. So people ask him, some people have asked him, what's the most difficult thing? And he said, training monks is difficult. But he doesn't suffer about it. And he says if he tells monks what they need to do 3 times, and if they don't do it after 3 times, he doesn't tell them anymore. It's like he knows he's done his duty. And so if a monk continues to be stubborn or heedless, okay, well that's their problem. He did his duty, he's not suffering about it. It's like, so in that, all these kind of things, like knowing what one's duty is, attempting to do it. People don't respond or behave appropriately, that's their making karma now. And then it's great to be, when you spend time with some of these great masters, because spending time in Bodh Gaya as I do, and walking past these beggars every day, several times a day, looking, totally wretched, old ladies crumpled on the corner, and people with polio, sometimes lepers, people who had leprosy. And then several of Thailand's masters have told me that those people waiting outside the holy sites, particularly the crippled ones, are the ones who were breaking the noses and snapping the arms off the Buddha statues at the time of the Turkish Muslim invasions. And it's like, well, when you know that, it changes it a bit, doesn't it? It's not like you're sitting there thinking, well, serves you right, harming those beautiful Buddha statues, but you understand there was a karmic cause. And Luang Por Liam once said he was in America and he was looking at the homeless people in America. They're eating food out of the garbage dumpsters. And he made the comment, if you or I were to go and eat food out of the garbage can, we'd get food poisoning and we'd be sick within a week, He said, but these people, they actually have to experience that for this period of time. For a certain amount of time, they have to eat garbage. And they don't die. They're in this state of, I'm sure some of them do, but many people day after day after day eating from the garbage cans, and can go on for years. Because that's a state, like a preta-like state that they have to get through because of the karma that they generated. Or these masters who can actually see past lives and the causes that created the results of this life, they don't have any challenges with being equanimous. So you see, it's all causes and conditions. It's a sad thing, isn't it? That's the kind of the sadness of samsara, is that people make a lot of bad karma not knowing what the implications will be, and not knowing that there's a path out, and people get stuck. But if you can't help, you can't help. And if they don't know, they don't know. And if you try to teach, and some people get it and some people don't get it, it's just a matter of knowing one's duty, recognizing one's good fortune, and knuckling down and practicing when we have the opportunity while we still can. And
mentioned that contemplation of death is a very powerful contemplation to maintain equanimity.
yeah.
Should we keep on repeating, or should we do it once? What is the
So I
frequency
think
to which we can keep on
I remember
contemplating?
when Lord Buddha asked Ananda if he cultivated death meditation, I think he said he did it 7 times a day. And Lord Buddha said it wasn't enough. But obviously Lord Buddha had high standards for his great disciples. For myself, I try to keep an eye on the level of heedfulness in the mind. So if you're getting heedful, it's like making assumptions that there is definitely going to be a future. If you get into obsessive planning, for example, or obsessively thinking about the future, or if there's a stubborn hindrance that just you're trying to do your breath meditation or you're sweeping, whatever you do, and it's not going away, then definitely use this, because it's very effective. It's like visualize the way that you really might die today. It does wake the mind up. And in terms of preparing the mind, so it's what they call panya sanya, it's wisdom perceptions. So in terms of preparing the mind to have penetrative insight into anicca, it's the most skillful contemplation in terms of preparing the mind to have the actual insight, that one of the ways it can be liberated. So certainly it's always praised. You can probably do too much of it. So it's like one does it to experience peacefulness and to not be heedless, to be heedful. But if one you can become obsessed with the fact that you might die, you could become paranoid, anxious, and that's not what we're aiming for. So it's the awareness that it could happen. In a way you're ready for it if it happens. But you don't want to be paranoid about it either. So you're aiming for well-being as a foundation for developing insight. For myself, I use it if a hindrance is particularly stubborn, or if there is heedlessness. But with Ajahn, my main teacher in Thailand, he used Marananusati as his main practice for 4 years. And he was able to experience upajjhara. When you start to talk about these great masters, it starts to seem like, whoa, but he was able to be in upajjhara for, I think, a month or 2 at a time. So upajjhara means on the edge of jhana. So just with this constant perception of I could die, his mind was experiencing hardly any thoughts and hardly any hindrances, and he would fall asleep in upajjhara samadhi and wake up in upajjhara samadhi. And talking about the body contemplation, Lumpur Cha kept telling him, Anand, you need to do body contemplation, And he's like, well, he was getting such good results from what he was doing, he was a little bit stubborn about not doing it. And he'd made this decision that he was going to do it. I think it was after 4 years or after 5 years. And then when he eventually did do the body contemplation, he got better results. And then he was like, oh, that's why my teacher was telling me. But he was getting very good results from his death reflection. And
The only problem is if we do frequent contemplation, we tend to become obsessive.
yeah.
So that is not desirable.
So I think that's why I think the metta bhavana is the balance. So that's why I would do, if I'm going to be doing body contemplation or death meditation, I will start with metta every time. So it's like, because your intention is to deepen your experience of well-being by having more mindfulness and wisdom and concentration. So when it starts with metta, that prepares the tone. My intention here is to be truly well. And then when you have that as the kind of the tuning fork, then when you're aware of death, you have done some metta and you've done some your normal mindfulness meditation, then the wisdom perception of the awareness of impermanence is occurring within a little bit peaceful mind. Then it should ripen in a good way. But one has to be careful with the way one does these things. So if you just get straight on the pillow and start thinking about all the gruesome ways you might die today, it might not be helpful. And even if a person has like really a lot of lust, hitting straight the death reflection isn't necessarily the right thing to do. You need to pacify. And this is sounding a bit extreme, but I'm going to say it because we're living in a dangerous realm. I mean, there's example in the sutras of people having sex with corpses. So it's like, if lust is really strong, one has to be careful. You just have to let it cool down. Contemplate karma, contemplate the drawbacks of the future lives, these kind of things. And then bring the mind to some state of some balance. And then apply this. This is strong medicine. Any strong medicine, you need to know what is the illness and what's the right dose. And then you need to take the whole course. So it's like balancing these things. Buddhanusati is also important. Sanghanusati, anapanasati, marananusati, and then the asubha kamatan. They all go together as a wise reflection.
Very often said that the thought before the death
Yes.
determines our next birth.
Yeah. Two things.
And there are some very senior Dhamma teachers who have, before their death, they have been in coma for a long time. So when they die, will the Dhamma practice they have undertaken for so many years enable the last thought to be a very positive thought to give them a much better life, next life?
So you would.
How is it? A little uncertainty is there
Yes.
in their cases.
Yeah, again, this is where you need a true master to have a look at what's happening in people's minds, because sometimes it's the case that a person appears to be in coma and the consciousness has actually already taken a rebirth. But because it's being kept alive with modern medicine, there's a certain type of consciousness left, related to the body, which is being kept alive, and actually, the mind's already moved on. I have heard that. And I've heard of occasions where the subtle body is like literally walking around the body, and the great masters can talk to the person, and they're just waiting for the body to die so that they can move on, and they're in an okay state. So just because the body appears to be unanimated doesn't necessarily mean the consciousness might be experiencing something else. And I have a recent example of something very interesting. I visited a lady in hospital recently, and she was close to death, and she wasn't she wasn't talking, she wasn't moving. And I didn't know, I don't have the same abilities as my teachers, but I didn't know what state her consciousness was in, but I wanted to help her. So I spread metta and did some chanting. And so a very interesting thing happened at the funeral. So they've already burnt the body. And this person's consciousness comes into the big sister and calls over the lady, because I have some disciples who run a coffee shop, and they were the one that told me that their friend was dying, and I said, well, should I go? So what it was when we have a gathering at an Andagiri, there's some people who bring some great vegetarian food every time we have a big gathering. But the lady who actually cooked it never came. But her sister came, younger sister. So it was this younger sister's older sister who was dying from cancer. I think she was told she had 4th-stage cancer 20 days before she died. She didn't even know. And this is also interesting because obviously the merit that she'd made was supporting her in a way that she didn't have much pain. She got 4th-stage cancer, she doesn't know, she finally gets a little bit of pain. I think after a week she was unconscious. And but I thought, well, no, I want to go and spread metta, I want to go and chant for her, because she did cook food for all of our gatherings for the last few years. But she'd never met me. And she'd never been to the monastery. And she didn't go to many monasteries. And so I was a bit concerned about that. So I wanted to go and chant for her. So anyway, they've burnt the body. And this consciousness comes into the big sister and starts speaking with the voice. She calls over the lady of the coffee shop. Hey, Dao, come here. I just want to say thank you for inviting that monk to chant for me, because it opened up the path of lightness. And I want to thank you all for coming, and I'm a little bit worried about this and a little bit worried about that. But I have to go now, bye. Everyone was grieving, everyone was crying. So soon she's gone, so soon she's gone. This idea we have about death is like they're dead, as some kind of permanent state of death. And it's like, well, no, they moved out of the body that moment and they're on to the next thing, actually. And so, but the fact that that woman used the words, Tang Sawang, she used the words, it was like the path of light was opened up. And thank you for inviting that monk. And now I have to go. And the sense I have is that some Devas came and were taking her to her next life. But if you were to look at her state when he went to the hospital, it's like, obviously she was still capable of listening, but not capable of talking. And I've heard that. I've heard that when people are dying, the last sense to go is the hearing. You have to be careful what you're saying around dying people, because there's that consciousness is still listening. And so what I've heard is the general level of the mind throughout the whole life, plus those last thoughts. Those two things are important. And I've also heard with Alzheimer's some interesting things. That the moment the consciousness is able to get out of the brain, where it seems like out of the body, where the brain is affecting consciousness, but the moment the consciousness is able to move, all of the faculties are there. If the person had sila, and if the person meditated, and they're able to move on to I've heard my teacher talking about that they were able to move on to a good life, good rebirth, even though they didn't have a clue who anyone was in the last years. As soon as they were able to leave the body, they had mindfulness and clear comprehension. So, yeah. And everybody was sitting there grieving. As soon as they saw the sister come into this body and say, I'm fine, I need to go now, nobody grieved anymore. So interesting, isn't it? Because there's just that sense of, she's fine. What are we worried about, Like, if you know, when my father passed away, I called up my teacher. I said, he's already reborn as a Deva. Well, you don't have much of a grieving process. It was like, he's fine then. I'm happy for him.
some saints choosing the moment of leaving this body. And they are very healthy, normal. They decide, sit in meditation, and then they leave the body.
Yeah, that's how I want to go.
Peaceful.
I'd like to go that way, please.
Everybody will like that.
Yeah, if I have an option, if I have a choice,
If you have a choice,
yeah, I'd like to go that way. I know a woman in Bangkok. She used to be the Minister of Finance, I think, and her father was a attendant of a famous forest monk called Luang Por Tate, and in his later years, he went to live at the monastery for periods of time, and it was tea time. Luang Por Tate was there, and the disciple was there. Luang Por Tate's here, the disciple was there, another person was there. And he falls over dead on the lap of his Arahant teacher. He just, whoop. And then Luang Por Tate arranged the funeral for him. So that's not a bad way to die either, is it? So and you think of the merit you need to have that you're dying in the presence of your Arahant teacher and falling on his lap. That's obviously a close karmic connection. Another story. You see, if you get me in story mode, it's because Arpan gave me the coffee before I came. He knows very well, if he gives me a strong coffee, there'll be stories. So it was in Melbourne. Sri Lankan lady came, it was the 1-year anniversary of her husband's death. But Ajahn Kalyano noticed that she was in a really good space. So normally, people have had a long marriage and it's the anniversary of the death, there's a little bit of sadness. She was fine. And so he asked him, well, what are you here for? Oh, it's the anniversary of my husband's death. He's died a year ago. Oh, you seem okay. Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm sure he went to a really good place. Well, what makes you so sure he went to a really good place? And she says, well, it was like this, Ajahn. We were having breakfast and he was drinking a cup of tea. And he said to me, I can see Devas. Oh, they're so beautiful. And he put down his cup of tea and he did this. And he was dead. And so because of that, she was very sure that the Devas had come to get him and taken him away. And so she also didn't grieve much about that. And it's nice, it's almost so many horrible deaths. It is nice to know that there's an occasional beautiful one. I guess the kind of death you have is going to depend on just how much good karma you've made. And I think killing animals in past lives and causing animals and other beings pain while they're dying is a large factor in if we die painfully or not. And if one has done less of that and done things like release animals, buy animals that were going to be slaughtered, or these other practices which reduce the suffering of beings, deliberately going out of your way to reduce the suffering of beings that were going to have suffering, then you start to set in motion some very powerful causes for less pain in your future and more help when you come to these difficult crossroads.
Bhante, is it practicing alone, individual, and a group sitting meditation? Does there any impact?
So I think this depends on character, tendency, and the type of mind a practitioner has. So the question is, practicing alone or practicing in a group, does it have an impact? So for myself, when I'm talking about trying to experience insight, I've had what I think they would call vipassana jnana insight experiences in group retreat situations. For me, for my character, while doing a retreat with Ajahn Samedo as a novice in England, and while doing winter retreat at Abhayagiri. But it was a very circumspect, composed group of people who were all practicing well and focused. So that's important. They all had precepts, they all have sila, they're all practicing intensively together. And then I have had insight experiences in retreat situations. And then my practice in Bodh Gaya, coming to practice for a month or 6 weeks, somewhere between 8 and 10 hours a day, every day, it's one of the busiest places you could possibly imagine meditating. And I do experience some peacefulness with consistency. And that obviously has something to do with the purity of the place and the blessings in the place. But I have noticed, like, the longer I stay in Bodh Gaya, it gets more extreme. Like, you can come out of a peaceful mind state and then there can be a very coarse mind state straight away afterwards. And I think that has something to do with picking up other mind states in there. So one has to, and I've noticed at that time that one has to rely more on mindfulness after the peacefulness. It's like after the peaceful state, because I think for many people, if it's like an upajjhara like mind state, the mind becomes very porous and sensitive. It can pick up the mind states, pick up some kind of what I would call psychic pollution. And then you need to have enough mindfulness not to be affected by that. And but I personally find it helpful. For me, it's like an intensive meditation workshop where you have to use all of the 5 spiritual powers. You have to use whatever tool you have: wise reflection, patient endurance, extra focus on mindfulness until unwholesome mind states cease, re-establishing on the wholesome mind states. But other people seem to do better alone. And I guess it's one of these trial and error things. And I suspect it has to do with how we've practiced in past lives. So for myself now, I've basically just come to accept that I must have practiced at Chedis in past lives. And I have something of a devotional character's nature. And bhakti, there's a bit of that bhakti there. And so for me, I can do it. But I have had other students come and practice who get really grumpy and go crazy after a week because they just can't deal with the impingement. They need more tranquility. Yeah, but I know some teachers discourage meditating in a group. But if when meditating on one's own, sometimes there's a lack of energy issue. It's like it's difficult to inspire oneself consistently, and it's difficult to have a strong energy for practice. Like, I can meditate for 10 hours a day in Bodh Gaya. I can't meditate for 10 hours a day at Anandagiri, at my monastery. I can do 6, 7 or 8, but I can't do 10. There's something about being in the place where the Buddha was enlightened that inspires extra energy in me. But that's something other people can. People do these retreats and the mind gets more and more peaceful the more solitude they have, the less contact they have with other people. So that's a character thing. There are introverts, there are extroverts, there are faith types, there are the dosa jarita, the loba jarita, the different jaritas that people have depending on karmic propensity, karmic habits. I think it's about experimenting, seeing what works. Lumpur Cha tended to force the monks to do both. When he was alive, he would have to come and practice morning and evening chanting together, and then there would be periods of time where you could meditate by yourself at Yukuti as well. And then if the monks wanted to go on Tudong, wandering off and find forests to practice in, he also allowed that. And there was a kind of a coming and going, experimenting with different situations.
Ajahn, how would you describe what is Khanik Samadhi, what is Arpana, Upachar and Arpana? How do you judge yourself, whether you're there, you're not there?
Right, it's a bit difficult, isn't it? So it is good to have a teacher who can say, because one challenge that modern people have, I think, is overestimation. So because apparently even in the Upajjhara spectrum there is coarse, intermediate and refined. And I think in this day and age somebody, so just to go through as a basic idea, Khanika Samadhi would be like when you're experiencing some peacefulness, where, hindrances is difficult, and then you get that cool, still, it might be just a minute to 5 minutes, and then there's more thoughts and more thinking and more restlessness. So that would be Khanika. But Upajjhara Samadhi, as Ajahn Anand describes it, is like once the mind finds that stillness, a bit of coolness, a bit of rapture, it will go for 20 minutes and only have a little bit of thinking, mostly wholesome things. But in a jhanic state, there shouldn't be any thinking other than if it's related to a particular reflection. And the first jhana can be accompanied by directed focused thought. So if it is a body contemplation, for example, your mind is focused on a particular contemplation, and but then it's good to check with the teacher. If you think you have jhana, go and check. Because I think what happens often now is somebody might have upajjhara samadhi and they think that first jhana, and they have the intermediate upajjhara, which is more refined, and they think it's the second jhana, and then the subtle upajjhara samadhi, and they think that's the third or fourth jhana. And that can be, the whole point of spiritual practice is to reduce conceit and pride. You don't want your spiritual practice to result in having a bigger sense of self who thinks it's special. So the problem with someone who doesn't have jhana thinking that they do is that it tends to eventually manifest as having a big ego. And so if you really think you have it, if what you're aiming for is liberation from the suffering that grasping at a self-view causes, go and ask an arahant if it's the real thing. And if he says no, it's normally good. So they will say, yeah, it's samadhi, but it's not yet appana. Or maybe it is. But someone like Ajahn and Ajahn can tell you. And when I've had some experiences, very helpful to get my Ajahn to tell me exactly what that was. It was very helpful. I think you could start to experience quite radiant, spacious mind states, and it's like, well, what is that? Because you've got one teacher says that was an arupa jhana. It wasn't actually. I needed my teacher to tell me what it was. It's kind of what you might call a temporary liberation, but it's not a rupa jhana. And I start to think I was pretty special if I had access to the infinite base of consciousness, which I don't. But one of these lifetimes, I'm working on it. It's often in retreats, isn't it, that people will start to get longer periods of peacefulness and more subtle periods of peacefulness. And I think more importantly, isn't it, was it what Ajahn says, at whatever level of peacefulness you have, when the mind comes out of the peacefulness, to then investigate. So this is, if you're doing this, if you're inclining the mind towards whatever degree of peacefulness it can experience, and then when it moves, and some people say, don't attach to peacefulness, don't attach to peacefulness. Ajahn Anand's like, no, attach to peacefulness first. He says, don't attach to peacefulness means those yogis and those rishis that can go into jhana for 6 weeks or 3 months, that's too much. But if you're finally experiencing a few moments of peacefulness and you say, don't attach to that, no. It's okay to be peaceful. The mind will move from the peaceful state naturally when it gets full of the peacefulness to the extent that it can. And then that's the time to use the extra energy and clarity in a specific investigation, be that death reflection or body parts and then what can then happen is the mind will go back into a peaceful state, sometimes more deep. It's like the wise reflection supporting the 5 spiritual powers. You've got sati, samadhi and panya. You need them to be working together. And then you get a really powerful practice. You get path factors working together. And often what people do, which is a bit heedless, is you have the peaceful meditation and then you kind of get into like reward mode. It's like, oh, that was really peaceful. Oh, nice. And now I'm going to go and eat something that I really like. Or actually, that's dangerous because the energy that you get from the peacefulness then can go into sensuality. And so what one has to do is like, no. When there is some peacefulness and composure there, don't get up. That's Mara that says, get up, well done. Well done. Now go and do something else. Okay, that's Mara. It's like, okay, there's peacefulness now, and you've been working so hard, you've been wanting to have these peaceful mind states. Now investigate wisely. Your wisdom will penetrate more deeply. And use the peacefulness that you have to put up with a bit more pain, because you have a bit more equanimity. Don't get up. Contemplate something skillfully.
Ajahn, these samadhis, and I mean, of course, all three move together. You have Sila Samadhi and Panya that move together.
Yeah.
So, in Panya, you are talking about Dukkha Bodh, Anicca Bodh, and Anatta Bodh.
Yeah.
So, in a state of very peacefulness, yes, sometimes you get the Dukkha Bodh coming up. There's Dukkha Bodh. So, what should be I mean, your aim should be to arise the bodhi, the panya, or the peacefulness, or both go very hand in hand.
So when it's peaceful, just allow it to be peaceful. Allow it to be still. But then you want to notice when it moves from that. And when it moves from that, there will be something that arises which will be dukkha. And there is the anicca. The mind's moving from its peaceful state. There is the hindrance that will come up, or the worry, or the thought, or the restlessness, whatever it is, which has the characteristic of dukkha as well. So when you can rest, allow the mind to rest, and get the energy for its contemplation. Be determined to notice the changing. It doesn't have to be in that peaceful moment. Enjoy the peacefulness. But when it moves from that peaceful state, notice that changed. That's what it said in the Visuddhimagga about how one develops insight practicing metta jhana. It's when the mind comes out of the absorption. It's allowed to enjoy a pure state of metta. But when it comes out of that state, as it has to, that bliss will change. The mind becomes more coarse. And normally, you sit long enough and the mind's quite peaceful. At a certain point, physical pain in the body starts to impinge at a certain point, and then you've got something to investigate. And then you can watch the changing and movement and cessation in feeling. But the peace that you can get, if you can allow the mind to rest in the peace, that will give the mind the integrity to actually be with that and see it, rather than contend with it and resent it and add suffering to it. You can just see a painful feeling, with some equanimity.
करते हैं जो प्रश्नोत्तर का सत्र था। तो पहला प्रश्न पूछा गया था कि आपने बताया कि धम्मचक्र प्रवर्तन सूत्र सुनते समय कई देवता एनलाइटन हो गए, बोधि प्राप्त हुई उनको, लेकिन उनका तो शरीर नहीं होता, तो क्या देवता भी मुक्ति प्राप्त कर सकते हैं? तो अजान ने कहा कि मैं देव तो नहीं हूँ, लेकिन जो सुना है और अपने आचार्यों से समझा है, उस हिसाब से जो देवता भी हैं वो उनके शरीर सूक्ष्म होते हैं। देवलोक में, रूप ब्रह्मलोक में और रूप ब्रह्मलोक में, तो देवलोक और रूप ब्रह्मलोक में तो सूक्ष्म शरीर होता ही है। मुख्य बात यह है कि उनको उतनी सजगता सती और रहनी चाहिए, और सती हो तो काम मुक्ति का काम किया जा सकता है। कि अब जैसे उन्होंने उदाहरण दिया कि विशुद्धिमग्ग में बताया जाता है कि मेत्ता ध्यान से भी मुक्ति का काम हो सकता है, और मेत्ता ध्यान का मतलब ये है कि ब्रह्मा लोक के जो मन की स्थितियाँ हैं, वैसी मन की स्थिति यहाँ पे उत्पन्न होती है। कई सूत्रों का उदाहरण दिया उन्होंने कि एक सूत्र में सक्का की भी बात आती है कि इंद्र जो थे वो श्रोतापन्न बने। सारिपुत्ता के प्रवचन के बाद भी एक सूत्र में बात आती है कि कई देवता लोग प्रवचन सुन के मुक्त हुए। और ये बात भी बताई गई कि भगवान की भी शिक्षा में आता है कि जो अनागामी है वो फिर इस लोक में नहीं आता, जन्म होता, उसको देवलोक में जन्म होता है और वहाँ पे ही वो मुक्त हो जाता है। तो ये समझ कई बार कहा जाता है कि मनुष्य जीवन ही सबसे अच्छा जीवन है, उसके लिए उन्होंने कहा कि बेसिकली ये इस कारण से कहा जाता है कि सुख और दुख दोनों का अनुभव होता है, तो इसलिए मनुष्य जीवन में हम शांति का पारमी भी बढ़ा सकते हैं सुख दुख का अनुभव होने के कारण। देवलोक में क्योंकि अप्रिय परिस्थितियाँ कम रहती हैं, तो वो शांति का अभ्यास करने की संभावना कम रहती है। तो अजान ने ये भी कहा कि जो तुषित लोग हैं उसके बारे में मान्यता है कि वहाँ पे जो उपचार समाधि का ठीक गहन अभ्यास करते हैं, तो तुषित लोग में उस तरह की समाधि का अभ्यास हो सकता है, और जो अभ्यास करते हैं उनका वहाँ जन्म हो सकता है। और देवताओं का भी जैसे एक और संदर्भ आया था कि जब उनके पुण्य क्षीण हो जाते हैं तो वो मृत्यु के समय सामान्यतः उनको भी कष्ट होता है, और अगला जन्म फिर किस तरह का होगा, जो संचित कर्म है उसके अनुरूप वो नीचे के लोकों में भी होता है। तो बताते हैं कि उनके आचार्य उनसे कहते हैं कि एक इस तरह की छंद रखना, इस तरह का एस्पिरेशन रखना कि हम साधना करें ताकि दूषित लोक में जन्म हो, वो एक कुशल छंद है। और ये भी उन्होंने हमारा ध्यान आकर्षित किया कि बोधिसत्व के बारे में भी कहा जाता है कि जब वो अंतिम जन्म उनका होने वाला होता है, उससे पहले वो तुषित लोक में ही ध्यान कर रहे होते हैं। हाँ, जो ब्रह्मदेव है वहाँ पे क्योंकि उनका रेडियंस बहुत ज़्यादा होता है, तो कई बार ऐसा होता है कि वो उसमें एक अस्मिमान जग सकता है, और वो फिर वो साधना में बाधक बन जाता है। एक और प्रश्न था कि इक्वानिमिटी जो है समता के बारे में समझाएं, कैसे उसको भावित किया जाए। तो अजान का उत्तर था कि साधना का उद्देश्य एक ये भी है कि जब हम समत का अभ्यास करते हैं, मन को शांत करने का अभ्यास करते हैं, तो उसके माध्यम से भी हम देख सकते हैं कि उससे बाहर आते हुए कैसा हमारा लोक धम्मों के प्रति किस तरह की प्रतिक्रिया है, उससे भी हमें मालूम पड़ता है, और उसके अभ्यास से लोक धम्मों के प्रति समता भाव रखने की और प्रेरणा जागती है। जो प्रथम आर्य सत्य है उसको एक्नॉलेज करना, और फिर जो हमारी साधना में बाधाएं आती हैं उनको सती संपजन्य से देखना था जब तक कि वो न गिर जाएं, वो भी एक हमारा समता का अभ्यास में मदद करता है। जो मरणान सती है उसके बारे में भी कहा, और भी जो दूसरी सती हैं, अनुसतियाँ हैं जैसे कि पन्या के लिए उपयुक्त हैं, उनसे भी समता का भाव बढ़ता है, इक्वानिमिटी बढ़ती है। मरणान सती का खास तौर पर उन्होंने बताया कि अगर हम कंटेम्पलेट करें कि मृत्यु किसी भी क्षण हो सकती है, और अगर मैं अभी मर जाऊं तो मेरे मन की स्थिति ऐसी होगी तो अगला जन्म कैसा होगा, इस तरह के कंटेम्पलेशन से भी मन बहुत जल्दी ही समता में आ जाता है। और उनका अपना अनुभव है कि जब साधना करते हैं और न्यूरन एक एक करके उनका निरोध होता है, तो एक न्यूरन के निरोध के बाद जो अनुभव आता है वो एक इक्वानिमिटी का आता है। इससे पहले कि दूसरा न्यूरन जागे, तो वो एक इक्वानिमिटी का अनुभव माना जा सकता है। जो लोक धम्म है उनमें हमारे को हमेशा कभी प्रशंसा होगी, कभी निंदा होगी, तो उसके ऊपर भी चिंतन करके कि भगवान बुद्ध को भी निंदा सुननी पड़ी है, महान अरहंतों को, अच्छे लोगों को, महान नेताओं को, सबको ही सुननी पड़ती है। तो इस तरह से विचार करने से, कंटेम्पलेशन से भी समता में पुष्टि की जा सकती है। मुख्य बात ये है कि हमको अभ्यास ये करना है कि जो प्रिय और अप्रिय है उसके प्रति अभ्यास करें कि ना हम उसमें एक तरफ झुके, ना प्रिय की तरफ ज़्यादा झुके, ना अप्रिय से द्वेष की तरफ बढ़े। और जो एक उदाहरण अजान चाचो देते थे, एक मुर्गी का खाना जैसे जिसमें मुर्गी है तो वो इधर उधर तो जा सकती है लेकिन उससे बाहर नहीं जा सकती, उसी तरह से हम भी प्रेजेंस ऑफ माइंड इतनी रखें कि जो जाग रहा है उसको जान लें और फिर उसको निरोध होने का समय दें, तो समता का अभ्यास पुष्ट हो सकता है। जब बहुत लंबे समय तक हम ध्यान करते हैं तो उससे भी उपचार समाधि की तरफ बढ़ते हैं, तो जो हमारी इंद्रिय सुख की जो लालसा है वो कम हो जाती है, क्योंकि उपचार समाधि का सुख जो है वह सूक्ष्म सुख है और वो हमारे को उस तरफ जाने से रोक सकता है। और जब हम उपचार समाधि या शांत चित्त के शांति से बाहर आते हैं, उस समय हमारे मन में क्या हो रहा है, किस तरह से हम बाहर की परिस्थिति को देख पा रहे हैं, उससे भी अगर हम उसको ठीक से देख पाएँ, उसमें उस समय रिफ्लेक्टिव मेडिटेशन कर पाएँ बाहर आने पे, तो हमारी क्षमता और अधिक बढ़ सकती है और शांति भी बढ़ती है और क्षमता भी बढ़ सकती है। तो जैसे उन्होंने 3 लेवल बताए, खनिक उपचार अपना समाधि के, अपना समाधि से ये जो ज्ञानों की ओर हमारा मन उस तरफ झुकाव होता है। और एक जो ओवरआर्चिंग बात जो हमें सिखाई जाती है कि जो कर्म सिद्धांत है उसको अगर हम ठीक से समझें तो जो कि एक प्रज्ञा का एक भाव है, तो उससे समता का भाव बहुत पुष्ट होता है, क्योंकि हमें मालूम पड़ता है कि जो हमारे जीवन में प्रिय अप्रिय परिस्थितियाँ आ रही हैं वो हमारे अपने कर्मों का फल ही है। और इससे बाहर के दुख भी देख के भी उसको भी हम समझ सकते हैं कि लोगों के कर्मों का फल है, तो मन में जो बेचैनी हो जाती है बाह्य संसार में जो कठिनाइयाँ हैं उसको देख के, उसके प्रति भी समता का भाव आ सकता है। जैसे उन्होंने लुंगपर लियम का उदाहरण दिया कि अगर वो अपने जो उनके डिसाइपल्स हैं उनको कोई शिक्षा दे रहे हों, कोई बात करने को कहें, तो वो 3 बार उनसे कहते हैं, उससे ज़्यादा फिर वो नहीं कहते कि भाई अगर उसको समझ नहीं आ रही है और फिर भी वो वही काम करना चाहता है जो मैं कह रहा हूँ, वो नहीं सुन रहा, तो वो उसके कर्म है, मेरे कर्म तो इतने ही थे कि मुझे उसको समझा देना चाहिए था। तो उन्होंने कई उदाहरण दिए, जैसे गरीबों के बोधगया पे बाहर जो देखते हैं जो वहाँ भीख मांग रहे हैं, कोढ़ी हैं और जो कूड़े में से खाना खा रहे हैं लोग, उन्होंने उदाहरण दिया। तो उससे देख के संसार में जो दुख है उसके प्रति हमारा जागता है, लेकिन उस दुख को उसके प्रति करुणा का भाव जागे, और करुणा में अगर हम कुछ कर सकें तो करें, और नहीं कर सकते तो मन में समता बनाए रखें। उसके लिए यही समझ हमारी होनी चाहिए कि हर प्राणी जो है अपने कर्मों का ही फल भोगता है। तो फिर प्रश्न था कि मरणानुस्मृति के बारे में, तो आपने बताया कि हाँ, मरणानुस्मृति जो है भी समता के लिए, समत्व भाव के लिए बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, क्योंकि वो उससे हमको ये सजग, हम कितने सजग हैं कि नहीं, सजगता बढ़ाने में, धर्म संवेग बढ़ाने में काफ़ी मदद मिलती है। और ख़ास तौर पे जो एक टेंडेंसी होती है बहुत ज़्यादा लंबे दीर्घ सूत्री प्लानिंग करने की, या कोई हमारा निवरण बहुत ज़्यादा अटक रहा है बार बार, तो उसको हटाने के लिए ये ध्यान करके कि क्या मैं इस समय मरने को तैयार हूँ, वैसा विचार करते हैं, तो वो उस निवरण को हटाने में भी मदद करता है। लेकिन ये साथ ही ये भी कहा कि ऐसी मरणानुस्मृति का ये लाभ, ये निष्कर्ष नहीं निकलना चाहिए कि हम मृत्यु के प्रति पैरानॉइड हो जाएं और हमेशा घबराए रहें। अपने आचार्य अजानन को उदाहरण दिया उन्होंने कि वो मरणानुस्मृति काफ़ी लंबे समय तक की उन्होंने, और कई महीनों तक उनकी उपचार समाधि बनी रहती थी। प्रश्न एक और था कि मरणानुस्मृति जब 12 बार करते हैं तो कई बार वो ऑब्सेशन हो जाता है, तो अजान ने कहा कि हमें महत्ता भाव का इसीलिए कहा जाता है कि महत्ता भावना करना चाहिए। मरणानुस्मृति जो भी हम साधना कर रहे हैं उसका उद्देश्य हमारी वेलबींग को बढ़ाना है, प्रसन्न हो, शांत हो, ना कि अपने को बेचैन करना है। और मरणानुस्मृति जो है एक तरह की बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग मेडिसिन है, तो उसको जैसे कोई स्ट्रॉन्ग मेडिसिन है उसको बहुत केयरफुली खाया जाता है, उसी तरह से मरणानुस्मृति का भी बहुत ध्यान से, और उसके साथ साथ के जो दूसरे अरुणानुस्मृति हैं, बुद्धानुस्मृति, धम्मानुस्मृति, संघानुस्मृति, वो सभी महत्वपूर्ण है, वो भी साथ साथ करेंगे तो बैलेंस बना रहता है। फिर एक और प्रश्न था कि कहा जाता है कि मृत्यु से पहले जो हमारा विचार था, संस्कार था, वो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण होता है, लेकिन ये भी सुना जाता है कि बहुत पहुँचे हुए संत लोग, आचार्य लोग जो हैं, एक कोमा की स्थिति में, बेहोशी की स्थिति में प्राण त्यागा, तो ये कैसे इस बात को समझे। तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये कह पाना कि जो प्राणी कोमा में है वो उसकी क्या एक्चुअल स्थिति है मन की, ये हम लोग नहीं कह पाते, ये कोई बहुत पहुँचे हुए आचार्य ही ये बात समझ सकते हैं। उन्होंने कुछ उदाहरण दिए जिससे कि हमें पता चलता है कि ये आवश्यक नहीं है कि जो प्राणी बेहोशी में पड़ा है वो उसके शरीर वहीं पे पड़ा है हॉस्पिटल में, जैसे पाइपों से जीवित रखते हैं, लेकिन हो सकता है कि उसकी चेतना वहाँ से चली जा चुकी हो। उन्होंने उदाहरण दिया एक महिला का जो कि वहाँ के बिहार में भोजन लेके आती थी, वेजिटेरियन भोजन लाती थी, उनको बहुत 4th स्टेज कैंसर डिटेक्ट हुआ और वो उनका शरीर अंत हुआ। तो उसके में वो गए और वहाँ पे उन्होंने चैंटिंग की। तो वो बता रहे थे कि जब उनके शरीर को वहाँ कर रहे थे, दफना रहे थे, तो उसकी चेतना जो है अपनी बहन के चेतना के सामने उस प्रकट हुई और उससे कहा कि जिस भिक्षु ने चैंटिंग की बहुत अच्छा किया, उसको धन्यवाद कहिए, क्योंकि उसके कारण मेरा मार्ग जो है पुण्य का मार्ग सशक्त हो गया है। तो इस तरह की बातें उनको सुनने को आई। एक और बात उन्होंने बताई कि उन्होंने अपने अनुभव से देखा है कि कई लोग जो कोमा में होते हैं उनमें फिर भी बात सुनने की शक्ति बनी रहती है, वो सबसे अंत में जाती है। तो कोमा में भी रहते हुए ऐसा नहीं है कि चेतना सब संपूर्णता से समाप्त हो जाए। तो मृत्यु के समय का क्या मानस था और सारे जीवन भर कैसा जनरल लेवल रहा, उस सब के मिले जुले प्रभाव से ही अगला जन्म होता है। बताया कि जब उनके पिता की मृत्यु हुई थी तो उन्होंने अपने आचार्य को कहा था और उन्होंने उनको बताया कि वो तो देवलोक चले गए हैं, तो तुम्हें परेशान होने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है। तो उससे उनका जो बिछोह का बंदोग था वो काफ़ी कम हो गया। तो एक और प्रश्न आया था कि कई संत लोग जो हैं अच्छा मृत्यु लेते हैं कि अब हम इस समय चले जाएंगे और उनका स्वास्थ्य भी अच्छा होता है। तो उन्होंने कहा हाँ, ऐसा भी सुनने में आया है। एक उदाहरण उन्होंने भी बताया कि एक स्त्री थी जो कि लंगपोतेक की बहुत, उनके पिताजी उनके अटेंडेंट थे। तो बताते हैं कि वो वहाँ पे बैठे थे और उनके साथ बात करते करते ही उनका प्राण छूट गया और उनका शरीर अपने आचार्य के गोद में जाके गिर गया। एक और उदाहरण उन्होंने अपने अजान जयंतों की विहार का बताया कि वहाँ पे भी एक लेडी आई थी अपने पति के पहली डेथ एनिवर्सरी पे। तो उनसे बात करते हुए उन्होंने बताया कि वो तो देवलोक में ही गए होंगे। तो अजान ने पूछा होगा तुम्हें कैसे मालूम? तो उन्होंने कहा कि जब वो बैठे थे मृत्यु से पहले तो चाय पी रहे थे और पीते पीते उन्होंने कहा देखो देवता लोग आ रहे हैं, और उनको देखते देखते ही उनका शरीर त्याग कर दिया। तो इसलिए उन महिला को लगता था कि उनके पति तो ज़रूर देवता लोग उनको साथ ले जाने के लिए ही आए होंगे। तो एक जनरल बात अजान ने कही कि जो लोग पशुओं को बहुत कष्ट देते हैं या उनको परेशान करते हैं या उनको मारते हैं, तो सामान्यतः उनको उसका कर्म फल जो है मृत्यु के समय मिलता है, इसलिए उनकी मृत्यु काफ़ी पेनफुल होती है। और जो लोग पशुओं से करुणा से पेश आते हैं, उनका सेवा करते हैं, उनकी मृत्यु कम पेनफुल होती है। वेनरेबल संगबोधि ने पूछा था कि क्या एक इंडिविजुअल के एकांत में साधना करना और समूह में साधना करने में क्या क्या फ़र्क रहता है, क्या उनका अनुभव है? तो अजान ने बताया कि एक हर एक के ऊपर इंडिविजुअल पे डिपेंड करता है कि कैसा उसका असर हुआ और किस तरह के लोग हैं जिनके साथ वो ध्यान कर रहे हैं। अगर लोग जो हैं बहुत अच्छे साधक हैं तो उससे उनका अनुभव है कि उससे लाभ ही होता है। उन्होंने बताया कि उन्होंने अजान सुमेधो की रिट्रीट की थी, एक और रिट्रीट भी की थी। तो उनमें हालांकि बहुत सारे लोग साधना कर रहे थे, उस रिट्रीट में उनको काफ़ी एक्सपीरियंसेस हुए इनसाइट के। जबकि दूसरा उदाहरण उन्होंने दिया बोध गया का, जहाँ पे काफ़ी शोर शराबा रहते हुए भी वो अकेले साधना करते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी काफ़ी शांति का अनुभव होता है। मुख्य बात ये होती है कि जब वो शांति का अनुभव हो और उससे जब हम बाहर आते हैं उस समय हमारे मन की स्थिति कैसी रहती है और हम उसको कैसे हैंडल करते हैं। क्योंकि जब बाहर आ रहे हैं तो बाहर की जो वाइब्रेशंस हैं उसका असर हो सकता है। और अपना उदाहरण देते हुए उन्होंने कहा क्योंकि उनका डिवोशनल नेचर है तो उनको ऐसे स्थानों पे जो पवित्र स्थान है भगवान ने बताए वहाँ पे या किसी चैत्य में जाके ध्यान करना बहुत अच्छा लगता है। जबकि उनके ही कुछ जो डिसाइपल्स थे उनको वहाँ उतने लाभ नहीं हुआ और एक आध हफ्ते में ही वो परेशान होकर चले गए। तो ये हर एक के इंडिविजुअल कार्मिक इफेक्ट है, उसकी लाइक्स डिसलाइक्स पे डिपेंड करता है कि क्या उनको अकेले में ध्यान करने से ज़्यादा लाभ होगा कि समूह में ध्यान करने से। लुंगपो का उदाहरण देते हुए उन्होंने कहा कि वो दोनों ही तरह का ध्यान करने का इनकरेज करते थे। फिर एक प्रश्न पूछा गया कि खनिक उपचार और अपना समाधि का जो भेद है वो कृपया समझा दीजिए। तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये भेद हमारे लिए महसूस करना समझना बड़ा मुश्किल है। कोई बहुत सक्षम आचार्य हों तो वही ये बता सकते हैं। उन्होंने बेसिक गाइडलाइन बताई कि जब निवरण बहुत हैं और जा रहे हैं धीरे धीरे, और एक निवरण जाया दूसरा गया, उनके बीच में जो परिस्थिति आती है उसमें चित्त शांत हो जाता है, वो कुछ मिनटों के लिए रहता है, तो उसको क्षणिक समाधि कह सकते हैं। उपचार समाधि की बात करते हुए कहा कि वो भी, उसके भी कई लेवल होते हैं, बेसिक लेवल, मिडिल लेवल और हाईएस्ट लेवल। तो उसका बता पाना एक सामान्य साधक के लिए संभव नहीं है, और कई बार हम अपना ओवर एस्टिमेशन कर लेते हैं। सामान्यतः जैसे उन्होंने बताया कि उपचार समाधि में मन शांत हो जाता है इतना, तो कई मिनटों 20-25 मिनट तक भी मन शांत रहता है, कोई विचार नहीं आता। अपना समाधि का उन्होंने कहा कि वो काफ़ी गहराई से है, जो जहानों की ओर ले जाती है। उसमें काफ़ी समय तक कोई विचार भी आएगा तो सिर्फ धर्म संबंधी विचार ही होगा। जब हम साधन के शिविरों में जाते हैं, बहुत लंबे समय तक ध्यान करते हैं, तो उस समय इस तरह की अनुभव होने की संभावना होती है। और उस समय अगर हम शांत हो गए चित्त और शांति से जब बाहर आते हैं, तो मन में कुछ हलन चलन होती है, उसको अगर हम इन्वेस्टिगेट ठीक से करें, एक सम्यक दृष्टि से देखें, तो मन और अधिक गहराई से शांति की स्थिति में जा सकता है और हम बहुत गहराई से शांति अनुभव कर सकते हैं। लेकिन अगर हम सजग नहीं हैं, तो शांति का अनुभव जो है हमारे को इंद्रिय सुख की ओर भी ले जा सकता है। तो शांति जो है वो प्रज्ञा के लिए भी महत्वपूर्ण है। बनस्पत कि हम जब शांति से बाहर निकलें, तो ठीक से जो बदलाव हो रहा है, जो अनित्य बोध हो रहा है, एक मन स्थिति से निकलने से दूसरी मन स्थिति में, उसको ठीक से इन्वेस्टिगेट करके अपनी प्रज्ञा बढ़ाएं।